I'm Van Sebastian here with this week's Written on the Edge Season 9, Episode 41 interview. I'll be talking with Catherine Lundhoff of Queen of Swords Press, discussing her works as well as the press's latest releases. So let's get to know my guest. Catherine Lundoff is the publisher at Queen of Swords Press, a small Minneapolis-based press specializing in fiction from out of this world. The Queen of Swords catalog includes the Vogel Award-winning Dapper lesbian capybara pirate tales of the Voyages of Cinrak, the Dapper, by A.J. Fitzwater, who we've interviewed. Basil put the link right there. The Lambda Literary Award-winning Lynes and Mathey duology by Melissa Scott and Amy Griswold, as well as the Astreiant Series by Melissa Scott and Lisa A.Barnett, plus books by Heather Rose Jones, Michael Merriam, redo. Michael Merriam, Jennie Goloboy, Dee Holloway, and some of Catherine's own work, including her Wolves of Wolf's Point series and her short fiction collections of Out of This World and Unfinished Business, Tales of the Dark Fantastic. Catherine, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me back.
Our pleasure. And it's been a couple years, including like this whole weird earthly pandemic thing. What have you been up to?
Stuff happened. There were wacky hijinks. Oh man, what have I been up to? I've been up to a lot. So yeah, so I think last time I was on was in 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we put out some books since then. In terms of my own work, last year, Tantor Audio optioned my werewolf series. I will just lean casually over and grab
Nice.
that and put them out in audiobook. If you follow Queen of Swords Press or me personally on social media, there's a great deal running on Silver Moon right now. And one of
Perfect.
the lovely things that Tantor did for me in a way that you don't expect from large media companies is they optioned the third book, which is still in progress. So now I'm all in a dither to try to get the third book.
Nice. Going into the
Well, they're
holiday
still
season.
interested.
Yep. And going into the holiday season, no stress. So
Basically taking November to just kind of get caught up.
fair. Well, so since you brought it up, let's talk about the Wolves of Wolf's Point.
Okay.
What should people know about the series?
It's about menopausal werewolves. It's about coming out at midlife. It's about found family and building community. And I started writing them because there were, I was just, getting into my early 50s, and there weren't very many books out there that featured middle-aged women or older women as protagonists in science fiction and fantasy. Horror, you get villains and so forth. You get the evil queens and the witches and whatnot, but not really as like heroes of their own lives. And I was listening to, actually, I got asked to write, this goes back to 2012, to the original edition of Silver Moon, which was published by another press, and then I released a new edition of it with some changes. And originally, I had been asked to write for a novella collection of lesbian werewolf stories. And I was kind of poking around looking for an idea, as you do. And I wandered into the murky morass of, I don't know, WebMD or something along those lines. And there was this whole section on the symptoms of menopause:
Oh no.
longer teeth, longer nails, mood swings, unexpected hair growth. And I'm like, you know what that sounds like?
Yes, it does.
So I went there and discovered that I had that rarest of all things, an original idea and genre that nobody's done before. After I put out the books, in England who did put out a short story or two, and I don't know if she ever got a chance to actually work on the novels, but they weren't queer. So I'm still out there with the only queer menopausal werewolves as far as I know.
Awesome.
So, groundbreaking. But
Very
nice.
awesome.
I mean, the good part about being on the part of the cutting edge of that is also that there's a lot more older protagonists, particularly older women as protagonists in genre than there used to be, and a lot is, relatively speaking, we're not talking YA numbers here, but I originally started a bibliography, and when I started the bibliography, there were about 10 things on it, and now we've got a Goodreads list that's well into the hundreds. We've got,
Nice.
new stuff coming out regularly, and some of it's really phenomenal. So it's been really nice to be a part of that particular, wave, even though it was kind of like out on the very edges of it at the beginning.
That's awesome, though. Do you have
So
any?
at this point, one last thing.
Mhm.
So in the time that since we talked last, Silver Moon has been translated into German and released in a German edition by Yova Publishing's German translation arm in Germany. And as I mentioned briefly, both books are out in audiobooks from Tantor Audio, and so they're out everywhere. So which is really kind of like,
Surprise.
advances, fun conversations about stuff. It's really cool. So anyway, and they've optioned the third book. So
That's fantastic.
there's
Do you have any of your own other works you want to talk about before we dive into what the press has on offer?
I've got a couple of things I'm working on. I'm going to be turning in an essay on Joanna Russ's Alex stories as Sword and Sorcery next week. And so I've
Tell
been
me what
working on
this is.
that for
I
the
don't know
last
anything
month.
about it.
So Joanna Russ was one of the first writers in the field to come out and write, work in science fiction and fantasy. She was an acclaimed feminist. She wrote an enormous number of essays. She won Hugo Awards. She and Samuel Delany, who was one of the other writers who was the first ones to come out, were wildly groundbreaking. They were friends. They were colleagues. They did a lot of
Nice.
work together. And she's, wrote a tremendous amount of, relatively speaking, for the short time that she was productive, because unfortunately she had really unpleasant health issues and had to retire, before her time, as it were. But one of the things that she wrote, they just released Penguin New American Library just released a not quite complete collection of her shorter works, but a lot of them. So a couple of the shorter novels and a couple of short stories. But she played around with a lot of different things. So there's time travel stories, there's, overtly feminist science fiction set on another planet. While Away is the planet that's usually comes up. The Female Man is probably the most famous one. That's remained in print after her death. Other things have been coming back gradually. And, really, very, very, pivotal figure in the field, did a lot of really interesting work. Some of it holds up really well, and some of it
Yeah.
she was most productive in the late 60s through the 80s, and then wrote a couple of collections of essays after that. And
Okay.
the essays were often published elsewhere. But as she got sicker, she, of course, wrote less. So one of the things that she wrote was a series of stories about a character named Alex. And they are very, very, at least in my opinion, with one exception, in the ballpark of Sword and Sorcery. Alex is a thief. Alex is a former religious zealot. Alex is an assassin. There's all of those things that are built into, Fritz Leiber's Spafford and the Grey Mouser series.
Yep.
Other types of stories like that deal with heroic fantasy of various kinds. Except it's all done through the lens of a lesbian feminist writing them from the late 60s into the late 80s. So very different spin, very snarky, lots of social observations, lots of, things about what it would be like to be navigating in this world.
Nice.
And so, I proposed the essay a while back, and they were like, yeah, do that thing. So,
Do that thing.
so I'm wrapping that up. I'm going to turn that in. I also do some writing. I think probably since last we talked, I started doing some writing for World of Darkness. So I've written
Nice.
some tie-in stuff for Vampire the Masquerade and for Wraith. And I
Nice.
also wrote the in-game scenario for Ghost Hunters, which is a hilarious story. When I wrote it, I didn't know I was writing the in-game scenario for Ghost Hunters. I thought I was writing for an anthology. And time passed, and the game came out, and I was like, wonder whatever happened to that anthology. I mean, I'd been paid and everything, so, And so I opened up the PDF of the games and the rules and kind of went flip, 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 flip. Oh, this is how they tell people to set stuff up, build characters, and go forward through this game. Oh.
Well done, you.
So I have been I'm working on something else that is a definite tie-in that'll hopefully be out next year. So working on that kind of stuff. Working on the next Blue Moon will be the third book in the Wolves of Wolves Point series. So working on that.
Nice.
So, but most of the rest of the time working on the press. So.
Nice transition. So, what's the press got on offer that you want folks to know about?
So much stuff. Okay, as you pointed out, we have seasonal offerings. So I want to put in a plug for one of our titles for this year. This is Michael Merriam's Terra Tierra de Cobre.
Ooh.
And Michael is a local author. He lives about a mile from me, and we do a lot of stuff together. This one is Weird West. Michael has another title out with us called Last Car to Anion Station, which is set in Minneapolis in about 2007 and is Welsh mythology meets Uptown. Uptown's a neighborhood in Minneapolis. And it's got a sweet lesbian romance, but they're also like pursued by the hounds of a noon, and there's all kinds of supernatural creatures, and it's this huge love song to Minneapolis at the time.
Nice.
Terra Tierra de Cobre is a novella, and it's the Magnificent Seven with an all-women cast and monsters. So totally appropriate for the time.
Nice.
The other thing I'm doing right now, and this is an ongoing project, is new editions of the Astreiant series.
Ooh.
So Matthew Bright, who is an author, editor, and designer, has done fabulous covers and fabulous book design. We've got the first three out. I forgot to grab a copy from downstairs because my shipment just came in. So Point of Hope,
We
Point of
missed the
Knives.
unboxing by minutes.
I know. There's an unboxing video out on our Instagram, though, and our TikTok.
Nice.
So yeah, Point of Dreams just came out. Point's going up for pre-order. That'll be out next month. Point of Size will be out in December. So that's all the original books. Now, because I'm really pushy and I happen to be a supporter of Melissa Scott's Patreon, I went back and said, hey, Melissa, there's a lot of stuff on this Patreon. Do you suppose there could be like a brand shiny new Nico and Wraith story? And Melissa said, yeah. So we had a nice chat about the 40,000 word novella that she was going to write. And then she turned in a full-size novel. So we're going to have a brand new novel in the Astreiant series, but that'll be out in January. We're aiming for January on that one. Edits permitting, but around then.
Will you have
so that'll be the next thing.
Pre-orders up in time for the holidays?
I hope so. I'm going to try.
Okay. I won't hold you to it, but so listeners know.
Yeah. We're definitely going to aim for that. So that's the plan. Matthew's done a great job with the covers, so I at least have covers. So as long as I can crank out material for the back cover copies and blurbs and stuff, we'll be good to go.
Nice.
So that's kind of the new stuff. We also last year put out this duology, and this is by Melissa Scott writing with Amy Griswold. This is Death by Silver and Death at the Dionysus Club. And for your listeners out there who are fans of Victorian gas lamp murder mysteries in which gay couples use magic to solve crimes, which is, you would think, a fairly small amount, but it's not. There's actually a bunch of people writing these.
Really?
Like KJ Charles has a lot of the things in that arena. Freya Marsky, C.L. Polk's dabbled in it. There's a couple of others, out there, and that's not, names that aren't familiar to me that I've just seen kind of blitz by. So Death by Silver was originally a Lambda Award winner, and it's really terrific. I mean, just really atmospheric, really great mysteries. I have suggested to the authors that perhaps they might want to sit down and write a third one, because I do most of our book tables and people talk to me about it a lot.
Nice. So
that and Wolves and Wolves Point are currently our best-selling series. So those two.
Perfect.
Other than that, we put out some great stuff. We put out a new, I don't know if Heather Rose Jones has ever been on here, but Heather has a really terrific podcast called the Lesbian Historic Motif Podcast, where she does like amateur historical analysis, and amateur is her term for it. I would not call it amateur, but she's not paid to do it. It's not her day job. Where she's done this incredible analysis of portrayals and depictions of queer women throughout history. And it's incredible. There's this huge blog with all these resources. And one of the other things that Heather does is she also has a section of the podcast where she puts out historical fiction featuring queer women. So There's a lot of fun things to listen to in there. She's a writer for Bella Books as well as for me. And so she's got a series out called Alpenia with Bella Books that's kind of Ruritanian romance set in this mythical a Central European kingdom where these women are that they can in fact use magic despite having been told for generations that they couldn't. And they're building like an educational system, and they're building, an infrastructure, and they're really well done, beautifully written, highly recommended. Anyway, got lucky enough that Heather had a novella just kind of sitting around. That's a retelling of Beauty and it's called The Language of Roses, and it's the retelling features a romantic beauty. And so she's really just like getting at the heart of that story in some really interesting ways that people don't normally do. But yeah, you should definitely check out Heather's podcast. It was really good, but all of her stuff is great. And we released a novella by a new in the sense of she's only had some short fiction and another novella out, author last year, Dee Holloway. And Little Nothing is this marvelously atmospheric historical fantasy. It's set in Florida at the start of the Civil War. The protagonists are a young lesbian couple who are trying to stop the Confederacy from using the local water horses against the Union. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
So lots of resistance, found family, lots of fun stuff. Interestingly enough, she took the ballad The Highwayman as a jumping off point and made it sapphic, and then changed a bunch of things and reset it in Florida.
Very cool.
So, and I've already mentioned Michael's stuff. AJ's stuff, of course, has been out for a little while. Alex Axe, I'm still hoping to get another Captain Marta Ramos book from Alex but one of the cool things that's been going on in Alex's other life is that Alex started writing for World of Warcraft. So Alex has done a couple of the big tie-in books for World of Warcraft in the last couple of years. Yeah.
Very nice.
I can't say I found them first, but I found them early. I found them before World of Warcraft did.
Right on. So you recently in this conversation just teased the fact that you work the book tables. Do you have any events and dates you want people to know about?
As a matter of fact, right after I get off this call, I'm racing first to the post office to mail people's pre-orders out, and then I'm going to the fairgrounds to set up for Twin Cities Book Festival tomorrow at the State Fairgrounds in St. Paul at the Progress Center. We are back again. We are booth 613. We will be there 10 to 5 tomorrow peddling books. So
this releases next Friday. So
okay. Upcoming stuff. I mostly got local things. Generally speaking, we do a lot of the local prides. We just did a brand shiny new queer book. That's our local Twin Cities Pride, which is absolutely enormous, spun up. We did Twin Cities Pride for the first time this year, which was nice. Twin Cities Pride is like, I don't know, 600,000 people over 3 days. I mean, it's enormous.
It's fantastic.
It's a lot of pride. So, but we also did like the very first Carver County Pride, which is like way out west in the cornfield. Well, way out west. It's an hour, but out west in the cornfields, and that was really fun. Like the Waconia Fire Department brought a fire truck out and let us climb all over.
Oh, that's cool.
So a little more rustic than Twin Cities Pride, but still good. Good energy. People very engaged, very excited. We do St. Cloud Pride. We do a couple of the other, Rochester Pride, and a number of book festivals. So TC Book Fest. One of our authors just did Syracuse Book Festival. No, sorry, Saratoga, New York Book Festival a couple of weeks ago. So we're doing, doing things like that. So we do a lot of those. So our next couple of events are pretty local. I'm looking at it for next year and starting to line things up. I was just at Worldcon in Glasgow in August.
Wow.
Which was really fun. That was a great time. And we had this magnificent tour of the Highlands with this hilarious tour guide. At one point, he put on the I Would Walk 500 Miles song, which has a name, but nobody recognizes the name, so they just recognize the chorus.
Yep.
And so this whole van full of adults, it was like several different groups. A couple of us from the convention, family groups and stuff, immediately burst into song and began singing along as he was, swinging around. He muttered something about Americans. They're fun. Like, oh, yeah, Ramon.
That sounds like a dream trip, though.
Oh, it was so great. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Awesome.
So I'm planning to go to Seattle Worldcon next year. That'll be in 2025.
Hmm.
I'm looking at a couple of other things. ReaderCon. There's a couple of events that we're always at. Like we're always at TC Book Fest. We'll be back at TC Book Fest. We'll be back at Rochester Pride. We'll be back at St. Cloud. I'm looking at whether or not we can swing TC Pride again. I'd like to. It's just it involved calling in some favors as well as leaning heavily on my assistant. So we'll see how all those people feel about that next year.
Fair. So, two things. One, we have seen a recent growth in the last couple of years, just in talking with authors, of smaller community local prides. And that's so heartening. I love the fact that that's happening because people aren't afraid to put them on anymore and they aren't forcing locals to travel to big cities. But two, will folks find a schedule of events at queenofswordspress.com?
They will, because I keep that up to date. And
Perfect.
yeah, you can also find it at my website, but my website is usually the last thing I update. It goes Queen of Swords Press, my blog, and then my dream with, and then, over to my website because
Right.
not everything carries over. My website is mostly about,
Right.
but if you want to know about what the authors are doing, that'll be out on the website. So yeah, as we get confirmations, we'll definitely have more stuff up there. So
Perfect. Any other topics you want to bring up before I dive into my get to know you questions?
I go for it.
All right. In our year of get to know you questions, what is your favorite writing snack or drink?
Hmm. I'm a big tea drinker.
Nice.
We were actually able to get our own tea blend for a couple of years from a local tea company. Unfortunately, life happened and they had to close up shop. I'm hoping they revive because I know the owner's thinking about it. But we had this really terrific chai that we had for a while, so I
Ooh,
drink
yum.
that. Oh, so
Yum.
good, so good. So yeah, I try to drink tea from like a lot of different, fun little companies that make things. I get things from Tea Punk Teas, tea and absinthe. Um, Desert Sage Natural is the other one that I tend to drink a amount of. So lots of teas. As it turns out, I can no longer drink coffee, which was a fun holdover from last year's brush with norovirus.
Oh
Zero
no.
10, do not recommend.
Oh.
Yeah, afterwards, my body was just like, yeah, you're not doing that to me.
Hmm.
so so it's all tea all the time now.
All right.
So I do tea, and then I drink a lot of. I tend to munch on dried fruit and nuts and things like that. It's usually,
Mhm.
nothing like super interesting other than, it's the good stuff from Equal Exchange because I can get stuff in bulk and then just pile it all together. Trail mix.
Nice. Well done. Well, while growing up, what sort of books did you read?
Oh, I read everything. Um,
Same.
is sort of the stuff of which after school specials are made. If you remember those from back in the old days, now
Yeah.
we're going to tell you about this horrific story about these children growing up in this environment and how they overcame it.
Uh-huh.
So, in order to ignore them more fully, I read a tremendous amount of Edward Gorey, Alexander Dumas, Sir Walter Scott, who isn't as well known now, but was the author of Ivan and a number of other, heroic historical novels. Ivanhoe's kind of great because he makes some really interesting choices. One of the things that he does in Ivanhoe is he makes one of the heroines, she's Jewish, which is like, I think the first time I ever saw that. Now, I am not personally Jewish, but I was very, very invested in the character of Rebecca, who's like really cool. She's brave and she's sympathetic and she's charismatic and she's, obviously in love with him, but she can't have him because he's a Saxon, and that's just weird. Not going over there. And he is betrothed to Rowena, who's, kind of boring and faints a lot and shrieks frequently and stuff. And so, you read Ivanhoe, and of course, my immediate reaction, I discovered that I could game the system. So from fourth grade to ninth grade, each year I wrote a book report on Ivanhoe. And each year my teachers, who apparently did not compare notes, were always like, it's a miracle. Because the
Well
early ones with a
played.
construction paper, and then they kind of go forward from there. My analysis got more sophisticated, but it meant I was reading it every single year.
Hmm.
And every single year I'm like, I don't understand why he's not marrying Rebecca. And so my mom would sit down and explain things about the status of Jews in Europe and how this was not a thing that was going to happen. I'm like, it's not right. He should marry Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
So heavily invested as a kid, in that. I read C.S. Lewis, and after a certain point, I graduated to Tolkien and did not look back.
Yep. Yeah.
In that way that so often happens when you start out with Lewis and go from there.
Uh-huh.
I started reading Ursula Le Guin when I was about 13 or 14,
Oh, wow.
the Earthsea books specifically.
Yep.
And, I read from there, I read a lot of, Arthur C. Clarke and got into Anne McCaffrey and all of those things, things, gateway fantasy things that you kind of wander into. But I
Yep.
definitely started with Le Guin and some of the, fantasies for kids. So, yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
I'm sorry, who's what?
Who has been the biggest supporter of your work?
Well, um, so I would say up until 2 years ago, my wife, Jana Pullman, who is a book artist and bookbinder. Unfortunately, Jana developed early onset dementia at the beginning of, I mean, dementia Alzheimer's is kind of much of a muchness in some respects, and in other respects is very different.
Mhm.
At the beginning of lockdown in 2020, for context, we live 4 blocks from George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, so we were very front and center with everything for a lot, and I was, living with a very vulnerable adult, and so that was just a whole year, so much stuff. And she, gradually, well, not even gradually, pretty quickly, her health went downhill, and things got pretty bad last year. And in January, I had to move her into memory care. So she's been in memory care since January, and then last week I had to move her to hospice. So she's sleeping more and more and more, and it's probably not going to be that much. So it's a couple of years to adapt to it and know this was coming, because this is the frontal temporal lobe variety of dementia, and it happens like, you know. But yeah, that's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
It has been really hard. I mean, consistently, it's just like, at this point, it's like, oh, one more layer of hard, yay! Sorry, I have lots of gallows humor about it all.
That's all right.
I am very fortunate in that I have a very enthusiastic fan base. I also have wonderful friends, but my fan base will come up to me at book tables on a regular basis and tell me what my writing has meant to them. I've had a number of people tell me that Silver Moon was their coming out book.
Wow.
A surprising number of those folks came out as trans, which had not occurred to me when I was writing it. I was basically just writing it with like, I want representation for women like me. And it hadn't occurred to me until it happened like the fourth time. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So there is a
Nice.
trans werewolf character in Blood Moon, which is the sequel. So,
Nice.
I didn't want people to have to imagine themselves in. I thought,
Mhm.
I could do this. I mean,
Well, exactly. We get to tell all the stories.
exactly. Yeah.
So, are you
Um,
a morning person or a night owl?
um, Kind of neither. I mean, left to my own devices, I would love to just like half afternoons to just sit down and crank through things. I can make evenings work for me. Mornings are harder, mostly because I'm making evenings work for me.
Fair.
So
All right.
are very slow moving.
So here's the $1 million question. What's your favorite hobby outside of writing and publishing?
uh, um, let's see. One of the things about Minneapolis that's really cool is that it's a big theater town. So I go to a fair amount of live theater because we've got, all of these funky little theaters doing these oddball things. I went to a musical about the deaths of Rasputin a couple of months ago. That was terrific. It was
Wow.
multimedia. There was singing, there was dancing, there was homicide. It was great. Assassinations, all kinds of fun stuff.
There was
Exactly what
singing,
I
there
look
was
for in a
dancing, there was
play.
homicide. That needs to be a t-shirt. I'm sorry.
There's this marvelous local theater that called Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society that does they either do recreations or their own spins on old radio dramas from
Hmm.
the 30s through the 40s. And they're terrific. We could try to go see them, every month when we can. And during lockdown, they're online, so we just watch them virtually throughout that. They're a lot of fun. So lots of stuff like that. Go to a lot of live theater. Go to music when I can. Other than that, in terms of like hands-on hobbies, I'm trying to get back into things like crocheting and jigsaw puzzles, but we'll see how the cats feel about that. They have feelings about other things I could do with my hands. So
Yes, they do.
yeah.
Well, has writing and publishing changed how you see yourself?
Oh man, yeah, definitely. So I actually started writing. I hadn't written any fiction until I was in my early 30s, and it was an idea that I start, checking out whether I could do something with this writing. So I had been running the local queer and feminist bookstore in Iowa City. Did that for a couple of years while working full time, a lot of help. Ended up getting walking pneumonia, which was really fun. I think I named it Chuck. I forget, but it had a name because I figured it was just a huge part of my life. Didn't have health insurance. Took a while to knock that out.
Oh no.
So after all of that, as you do, Jana still had a couple of years left on her contract with the university down there. So I ended up in law school, just like you kind of wake up one day and suddenly you're taking an LSAT. Uh,
Oops.
and so I started law school, and one of the things I learned was that absolute misery makes me telekinetic. So I would walk into the kitchen and like dishes would slide off the countertop and stuff. And so I just broke a tremendous amount of things with my brain during the accelerated semester of law school. And in the midst of it, I think in a desperate effort to save what was left of the china and glassware, Jana said, "Why don't you try writing a book?" So I started writing this book on feminist bookstores, and I didn't have institutional support, and I didn't have a lot of things that usually make not big nonfiction projects work. Eventually able that, but I started working on it. During the course of that, once I started writing, I started looking at fiction, and I guess I am at heart a competitive soul, because my take on it was I could do better than this. So I started writing short fiction, sending it out, sold my very first story. It came out in Jinx Spears' lesbian short fiction, as a matter of fact.
Nice.
And for a bisexual, I turn up in a lot of lesbian spaces. But anyway, it wasn't a requirement. You just write lesbian characters.
Hmm.
And it got this fabulous cover that World Fantasy Award-winning artist Alicia Austin did the cover based on my story. So there I
Nice.
am, a little baby writer, and I open up the envelope at the post office, and I'm like, oh, running home, very excited. So I, wrote short fiction for a number of years, sat down, started working on the novels. So I've written 3 novels to date, got a couple more in progress, and a whole lot of short fiction. So it changed my perspective on myself as a creator. I think I became a lot more self-confident. Publishing has definitely helped with that, simply because I have to be, because, people will walk up and they will say things like, "Why are you better than me publishing my book myself?" And I'm like, well, with that attitude, I'm not. So good luck. But somebody did a more polite version of that last week, and I said, well, because I absolutely guarantee you that I am probably better at marketing and book selling than you are. If you don't have a
Mm.
background in it, you don't do it professionally,
Right.
I can probably, outsell anything you can do on your own. So that there's been a lot of that, where I've just, been, I teach more classes. I just taught a class at the Loft Literary Center with Jennie Goloboy, as a matter of fact, who's a literary agent in her other life. I've taught at Clarion online, and a number of other places. And it's changed my level of confidence in my own work, but also how I can perceive other people's work. While still recognizing, because people will ask, what is your number one criteria for books that you accept at Queen of Swords? And I'm like, well, I have to want to read them over and over again, and then sit behind a table for a couple of years, still enthusiastic about them, enough to sell them, because people will buy things if you are enthusiastic enough.
Hmm.
And so on the one hand, I can take that apart and look at the parts of that that are objective, but there's also very much a subjective quality to that. So you can't really walk away from that, with judging that it is my press, my taste.
Right. Right. All right. Well, if you were to write a spin-off of one of your side characters, which one would you pick?
Oh, um, if I thought I could do it well, and maybe someday we'll be able to, I would love to write kind of a sequel. One of the recurring characters in the Silver Moon series is Deputy Lizzie Blackhawk, and Lizzie has been wanting. Lizzie wants to get old enough to come out as a werewolf. Lizzie really wants to be a werewolf. Um, but I made the character Native American. I made her sort of sexually ambiguous. So there's a couple of things in there where I'm like, that would be an enormous number of sensitivity reads. So we'll see how we feel about that, to get that right, because I'd really want to, do justice to that.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to do a spin-off adventure with her and some of the other, minor characters from the pack, and what they get up to. So it's in the back of my brain on a back burner, but the next book is going to focus on Becca and Aaron, who are the core couple within the other two books. In
Nice.
part because some of my fan base has been explaining very gently to me that that's what they want to see. So I'm like, okay,
Gently as a
letting go
fan
of my
base,
first idea.
gently as a fan base ever explains it. So, have you ever traveled as research for one of your books?
Um, I have traveled and then used the settings for stories.
We get a
I
lot of
haven't
inspiration. Yep, we get a lot of authors say the reverse happens.
yeah, yeah. But usually, I mean, a lot of like my big travel is based on whether or not my accountant can look at it and go, that's a tax write-off. So I can present him with Scotland. I could present him with Helsinki Worldcon. It's a little harder to go, I have this sort of vague general idea, so I thought I'd go hang out in New Mexico for a little while.
Fair. All right,
Yeah.
final question. How do you celebrate when you finish a book?
That's a good question. So a number of years ago, I stopped drinking. So I'm elderly straight edge, and I've recently found this nifty little place that specializes in non-alcoholic beverages, and they have this marvelous fake champagne and fake gin that is just like chef's kiss.
Nice.
So it's some of the fun of sitting down and drinking an adult beverage without the after effects. So
Hmm.
that's been kind of fun. Otherwise, I try to go out to dinner with friends. Do something celebratory for big stuff.
Hmm.
There's a local tapas place that delivers. So,
Oh, yum.
but that's big stuff.
Yeah, fair, but yeah, yum.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right, well, you made it through my list.
All right.
And we've talked about upcoming let me try that again, shall we? We've talked about upcoming works and appearances. Is there anything else you want folks to know about?
Well, so right now I'm talking to a couple of different authors about projects, about upcoming projects. People usually immediately ask if we're open to submissions, and honestly, because of my wife's condition, we haven't been able to open up for submissions for a while because there's too many variables, and people don't usually like it very much if you're like, I need to put you on hold indefinitely while I go deal with this.
Right.
So I've been pretty selective about people who are prepared to deal with that, know it coming in, have confidence that I will make it happen, but recognize that there are going to be some barriers and that there's some stuff that has to, kind of be settled. Originally, at the beginning of this year, I was hoping to have all the Astreiant books out this year, including the new one, and went through and like between the cover artist, Melissa and myself, we had 2 cases of COVID. All 3 of us changed jobs. There were 2 moves, and I had to move my wife into memory care. And there were like, I don't know, it was this enormous list of stuff. So I spelled it out, and everybody went, "Oh yeah, no, we can't make those deadlines." So that's why the new book is going to come out in January. I
Totally
am
fair.
looking at doing an ebook omnibus of all of the books as well, and that'll be after the newest one comes out.
Nice.
But there are another couple of folks I'm talking to about projects, and I'm hoping that we can, get something worked out in the next few months. And again, it'll be out on all of our social media. And yeah, because I've got read some really great things, lately that, one of the things that, when you whittle it down to basically just invites is that, sometimes you read something, it's a great project, you want to be the publisher for it, but you have to recognize you're not so I just kind of went through that with an author recently, and I don't want to do that very often. So
Right.
I'm gonna probably stick with the close-in invites for the time being, just so people know what they're getting, what they're dealing with, and then hopefully, when things settle down, as they inevitably will, at that point, I'll try to move into opening up for submissions again.
Right.
I also haven't figured out how to handle the AI problem, and so I'll need to tackle that as well. So,
Fair.
yeah.
All right. Well, I know we've already dropped queenofswordspress.com, your website, catherinelundoff.net for folks, and they can
Yep,
springboard off of that to your blog, right?
they can.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then both
and
sites
then
have the
we're out
socials,
on
yeah?
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on. It's Queen of Swords Press at TikTok. We're Queen of Swords Press on Instagram. We are Queen of Swords Press on Blue Sky. QoS Press usually. QoS Press on Blue Sky. QoS Press on Instagram. Queen of Swords at TikTok. We're also on. I personally have accounts that we have a Facebook account, of course, for all the value one gets from that these days. And then we have a newsletter. We have a monthly newsletter. So you can sign up for that at the Queen of Swords Press website. I don't have a personal newsletter because I just lump all my news in there.
But
Too much to deal with. And my fabulous assistant, who we have recently figured out that my assistant, whose name actually is Alexa, has she's not my imaginary friend in my phone. She's an actual real human being. Has been with me now since 2018, and I so much respect for her endurance, I gotta say.
shout out to Alexa. Yay!
Alexa's awesome. She does the newsletter. She helps me do social media stuff. She helps me do book tables, all kinds of things. We've also had a couple of great interns. And one of the things I missed from a couple of years ago was that things were calm enough that I could actually take in interns. So I had interns in the university and stuff working on things, and
Nice.
man, they were terrific. So I hope to do that again too.
Nice. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Rewriting is a fabulous thing and can make a much better piece of work than you started out with.
Amen.
And sometimes you start out a story in the wrong place in the wrong head, and you have to revise it. Not that I speak from experience or anything on this right now.
All right, folks, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Catherine Lundoff for joining me today. Catherine, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's a lot of fun.
Our pleasure. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators, so if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, like, subscribe, do all the bells and whistles so you get the alerts. This show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listener stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Oh, what's there? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.